let's get back to the Nigerian Senate, because those folks are currently, the senators are on 8 weeks recess. They'll be back in the the second week of September, by the way, making the announcement. The Senate President, Ahmad Lawan, says the various committees will, however, continue to work on oversight with MDAs, in particular with respect to work given to committees on finance and national planning on the medium-term expenditure framework, or MTEF, ahead of next year's budgets. Let's chat around the current legislative year with what all the lawmakers have achieved in the process of lawmaking and how they all connect to Nigeria's quest for economic advancement. Joining me for this is Sumner Sambo, Arise News political editor and the director of news in Abuja. Sumner joins me as expected from Abuja studios. Good to see you again on Arise Exchange, Sumner. Thank you very much. Now, let's hit the ground running on this conversation. What's your assessment of the current legislative year at the National Assembly?
Well, Bosan, it's been a very difficult period for the National Assembly members. This legislative year is when they were able to achieve so many things, and then they also received lots of criticism. This is the time when the two leaders of the National Assembly, that's the chairman, Ahmad Lawan, who is also the president of the Senate, and then the deputy chairman, who is also the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, actually consolidated on their powers as presiding officers of both chambers. And in this period, they were able to achieve some critical bills while also receiving some serious bashing from the Nigerian public. And this is actually, happening because some critical bills were attended to by the lawmakers. Just for the figures that you would want, and of course our viewers would want, so far since 2019, when they came on board, the Senate has had 661 bills, presented, and then the House has had 1,353 bills presented. All this combined will give you 2,014 bills that have so far been presented. And now, the focus was actually on some very strong economic bills and then some serious reforms. Now, these reforms, some of them were achieved, some of them were really not achieved. And as a result of that, we had the Nigerian public really hitting them hard. Let's start from the very big ones. The big ones, of course, is the recently passed Petroleum Industry Bill, which has been in the Parliament for a long period of time. And we've seen both houses uniting and reaching, harmonization on specific issues. For example, the issue of allocation of funds, equity funds for the host communities, they've now passed 3%. And then the earlier demands were for 10% by the host communities, and then the Nigerian government actually said they could give 2.5%, but the Senate proposed 3%, and then the House of Representatives 5%. But when they went into a harmonization committee, eventually 3% passed, despite all the controversies. Now, apart from that, we've also seen some very, very important bills passing, and those bills are the ones that have drawn lots of controversy. For example, the finance bill was revisited, and we could see VAT being raised to 7.5%. The Senate and the House of Reps have actually received lots of commendation based on that, because they worked with the executive to ensure that this bill helped to boost the economy. And then we could also see the criticism coming from the aspect of loans. This National Assembly, particularly the Senate, has been accused of almost approving any financial bill that comes to the Senate in terms of loan requests. And a lot of Nigerians are really not happy about that. That's why they termed the Senate, for example, a rubber stamp Senate. This did not resonate well with the Ahmad Lawan Senate, which has the powers to approve all these loans. And he has hit back at Nigerians, saying that if Nigerians do not like what senators are doing, in 2023, they have the opportunities to hit back. And so these are some of the criticism that they've been having. But one very critical bill that they raised, which really helped the country very well, was the issue of this bill on the, sorry, if you permit me, let me just take a look at it very well. It is on the critical aspect of the production, the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Amendment Act. That happened in their first year, 2019, and it helped the country to actually realize about 320 billion naira from a mere legislation that had just been lying fallow and which we didn't take advantage from. So they used that as a plan to actually commend themselves. But in the face of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, which has, stopped or, kind of like tweaked the aspect of electronic transmission of election results, which is still controversial, but which there's still a window for something to be done because it's at the Harmonization Committee right now. A lot of senators are taking the flags on behalf of the Senate for not giving Nigerians what they had deserved. And if that is the case, then it means that the lawmakers would have to be worried about what will happen to them when they meet their constituents.
So now, this assembly had also passed the Companies and Allied Matters Act, of course, which has been lying fallow for about 30 years. And of course, also the BOFIA, by the way, the bank and other financial institutions. So you can say that. But again, this is a very important part of this conversation, Sumner, because time is money. And many Nigerians, well, rightly or wrongly believe that our legislative process of committee meetings and holding debates, or whether plenary or whatever, are too slow and sluggish at arriving at very critical decisions in the best interest of the country. So you talk about 2014 bills. Now, this is a whole lot, if you ask me. So do you think the process of lawmaking in Nigeria and having various meetings, ad hoc committees, whatever, stand-up committee, do you think this process is too slow? Do you agree with Nigerians that it could be faster and it's worth time for money?
Yes, it's actually worth time for money. A lot of these procedures are usually as a result of the parliamentary processes itself. But most times when there is national interest, and when it comes to money bills, for example, the National Assembly has the powers to actually speed up the processes. At some point in time when there is an executive interest, which the National Assembly has bought into, you will see the process being fast-tracked. And of course, that's where we've also seen criticism on the Ahmad Lawan Senate, for example, which has more powers in both chambers to actually approve lots of requests for the executive, and which is empowered constitutionally to actually fast-track executive confirmations and all of that. And so when you take a critical look at how they fast-track this executive request, you also see Nigerians calling them rubber stamp, that they are trying to fast-track all of this to worm their way into the heart of President Muhammadu Buhari. And meanwhile, sometimes when they also decide to slow down, people will now say that, look, they are not working very fast. Now, don't forget, one of the major things that they've done...
Hold this very well. Let's take a break, because that's my next question. What should we prefer? A rubber stamp? There's nothing wrong with the rubber stamp, by the way, because a stamp is a sign of legitimacy and authority. So, how should we go? Are we learning democratic norms here? Are we too much in a haste? Or there is a better way of doing things, maybe a little bit better? Sometimes when you watch those plenaries and others and all that. But let's leave that conversation after the break. Sumner Sambo, stand by. We'll be right back. Sumner, and then everyone, stand by as well. We'll be right back. Yes, let's hit the home run on the economics and business of lawmaking in Nigeria as you consider the final lap of the calendar year in a few months' time. Chatting with me on this is Sumner Sambo, Arise Director of News Abuja and our political editor. Thank you so much, Sumner. Let's continue from this rubber stamp. The previous National Assembly was considered to be antagonistic of the executive branch. Now this is called a rubber stamp. Which one is better from your political journalist point of view? Which one is ideal, really? Or what makes them different?
Well, thank you so much, Bosin. The ideal thing for democracy to actually flourish is when you have a National Assembly that is elected particularly from a party that's different from the executive. Once you do that, it will serve as a watchdog. Because now, within this All Progressives Congress-led federal government in the past 6 years, we've experimented with 2 National Assembly, all dominated by one party, but from different perspectives. The first National Assembly under it, that's from 2015 to 2019, was not in sync with the executive because the lawmakers elected their representatives without an intrusion of the party's authority. So we had Senator Bukola Saraki and Yakubu Dogara emerging based on what the federal lawmakers felt was good for them. But now when we've had the party having its way, having learned from that lesson, we've seen Ahmed Lawan emerging, and then we've seen Femi Gbajabiamila emerging. There's a good side to it and a downside to it. Now, the thing is that, yes, the executive and the legislature are in bed. So there is no criticism enough. And we do not have enough lawmakers in the opposition to actually stand out and help the public to ensure that bills that are not favorable to the public are stepped down. So we've seen an overwhelming power of the APC, going through, and bills that do not necessarily fit into the thinking of the public have gone through, while some that are good for the public also go through. So in all of this, democracy watchers would actually advise that it's good for the parliament not to necessarily be so much in bed. Because when you hear a president of the Senate saying that almost any bill that comes to parliament will pass, then of course a lot of people will be afraid. And that's why we've seen these loans that are being brought in and other bills, passing, and Nigerians are asking, are you federal lawmakers actually questioning the huge loans that we're taking? Well, sometimes you hear the president of the Senate speaking as if he belongs to the executive, and this worries a lot of Nigerians. Now, let's talk about the good side of it. The good side also is that whatever the APC thinks is good for the development of the country and for the movement of its agenda, it easily passes. Now, you can see, for example, the National Assembly has restored the January to December budget cycle. This is a very big win because previously when we had legislators that were opposed to the executive, we did not have that. So there's a good aspect of it. You can see the budget coming in and going out as and when due. And then you can see some very good laws like the Banks and Other Institutions Act, the Bofia Act, the Finance Act, the Police Act, the Petroleum Industry Bill, which has been pending the National Assembly for long, going. And then you can see some other bills too, like the Emergency Economic Stimulus Bill coming. You can see the Local Industry Patronage Bill coming, and some other bills that are still being dealt with. So there's a win-win at times, and then sometimes the public suffers.
May I respectfully cut in here? So why are Nigerians, generally speaking, on the street seem to be unhappy with the National Assembly? Is it the size of their pay packet? I mean, it's the size of, or what is it really? Or is it a position that almost every man on the street would want to get into? Because there are bills to be passed, and now you have the executive and the National Assembly leadership in bed.
The major problem is that a lot of Nigerians do not understand what federal lawmakers are meant to do. They sometimes confuse their role to be that of executive role, that a lawmaker is supposed to attract certain projects to their area, a lawmaker is supposed to attract certain job quota to their area, and as a result of that, that pressure also, when it's put on the lawmakers, they lose focus of lawmaking and focus on seeing how they can lobby the executive to get projects to them. And so that in itself will make federal lawmakers to go into bed with the executive, because if you're a senator, for example, and you don't attract projects to your place and you just go back home and tell them that, look, I brought 10 bills and these bills have been passed and every community in Nigeria will benefit, they'll tell you that no, they are not interested in what every community in Nigeria will benefit. They are interested in what you have brought to your own specific community. So there seems to be that misunderstanding. And as a result of that, when lawmakers don't meet up their expectation, there's a problem. And if you're a lawmaker, what do you then do? The next thing is for you to see how you can romance the executive to ensure that they bring more projects to your place. And so that's what we are seeing.
So when you look at the calendar, do you think we still have very critical and important socio-economic bills that this assembly should deal with before the end of the tenure when they resume in September. We have the social media bill and all of that still out there, and there's still a whole lot of angst about the fact that some say the government is trying to repress the media and that there are a whole lot of other critical socio-economic issues to attend. So why focus on the social media, for example?
Thank you, Bosin. This National Assembly, Ninth National Assembly, still has a lot that it can do within the remaining 2 years that it has to be in session. Now, there are some very critical bills that have been brought in place, apart from these media bills, which unnecessarily is diverting their attention. And I can tell you that most of these bills are surreptitiously being brought in through the executive. The executive doesn't want to own up, but from our investigations as journalists, we've seen some of these lawmakers saying that these media bills, for example, like the NBC bill, the Nigerian Press Council bills, in one way or the other, they are receiving lots of pressures from the executive. So as a result of that, they've introduced those bills, and you can see that the person who brought those bills, for example, in the House of Representatives, Honorable Deyemi, has stepped them down because this was ab initio, not necessarily his bills, and he did not have a proper understanding of what these bills were all about, and he did not do a lot of consultations, and we have thought that when these bills come for public hearing, he will be enlightened and educated more. But when they came for public hearing, you could still see him trying to grandstand. But when the public pressure was so much on him, he had to step down. But I can tell you that there are some very good laws that we're expecting. The Constitution amendment exercise is one of the major focus that we are hoping. There are demands for restructuring, there are demands for more states, there are demands for more local government, there are demands for fiscal federalism, there are demands for, states to be empowered more. The federal government is receiving 52% of revenues, and a lot of Nigerians are not happy with that. The states are receiving 27%. A lot of Nigerians said it should be the other way around, and local governments are receiving 21%. Now, in this constitution review, many submissions that were done at the zonal public hearings wanted the federal government to take 27, some even advocated 21% that the local governments are taking, so that the 52% will go to the state, because they say it's at the state level that lots of economic activities are ongoing. Now, we have some special bills too, like the Nigerian Special Zones Authority Bill, that has to do with all those free zones, free economic zones, and then we also have the Solid Minerals Producing Areas Development Agency Bill. That is another very strong bill. There's the Forfeited Assets Management Authority bill also, which will help to ensure that all assets seized from by AMCOM, for example, is put in a particular authority, and all other agencies actually bring their seized assets, and that authority will be in charge of helping us, especially at the EFCC level, where we've seen lots of forfeited assets, and then we do not know what usually happens to them. There's the NDDC Amendment Act. There's the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency NIMASA Amendment Bill. If we put all of this together and the lawmakers are able to coast home with them before 2023, I can tell you that they would have achieved so much.
Well, Sumner Sambo, it looks like you've been very busy as a political editor, keeping an eye on the political class. Sometimes those of us who are watching on the other side find it very difficult to understand what those hundreds of lawmakers are doing, both at the upper chamber and the lower chamber. But from the way you really know what's on their inbox right now, it looks like when they come back in September, they've had a lot of work to do. So when they return in September, we'll talk to you again to find out in particular how they're working on the next year's budget, considering where we are right now in terms of borrowings, economic recession, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the roadmap ahead. Thank you so much, Sumner Sambo, for your deep insights. Enjoy your evening. Sumner Sambo, Arise News political editor and director of news in Abuja.